Hey, Hannah Mouse 1 here. In this video, I'll be talking about season 1 of the Disney Plus series Willow. Spoilers. And I've never watched the 1988 film, so I was going into this completely blind. All my thoughts were based on how well the show stands by itself. Now, I am perfectly willing to admit that some shows just aren't for me, but I can usually make a decent guess at who it was aimed for. I'm not really a fan of Top Gear, but I could make a decent guess at who might be, but Willow? I couldn't even hazard a guess. It was so tonally confused. It portrays itself on the surface as a high-powered fantasy with a visual style that's reminiscent of Netflix's The Witcher or HBO's Game of Thrones, but the language feels really modern. Like, you can't have your big evil monster who looks like this end their dramatic monologue with, "He's eternal, bitch." And the music, oh god, the music. It used this modern soundtrack that couldn't fit less with the visual style and setting if it tried. There's a reason that medieval shows use a certain style of song, and these tunes just aren't it. I'll be getting somewhat invested into what I'm seeing, then some rocking music will pipe up, and then I'm not looking at fantasy characters in a fantasy setting. I'm looking at extras from a local amateur Shakespeare production on their coffee break. I don't even know what age this show was aimed at. In a lot of ways, it was reminiscent of the shows I would watch when I was a preteen or an early teenager. The sort of show that might have been on CBBC or something. The high school style of speak, the teenage romance. So maybe it was aimed at a younger audience. And that's fine, but then they make jokes about Kit's evil witch grandmother's bondage parties and show some pretty sexual scenes with Borman, so it has an older target audience. I can't imagine that many in that age range would resonate with the plot or the characters. Seriously, if you felt like this show was really aimed at you, let me know, because I want to know that such a person exists. Even the way they treat death in the show, this old bloke dying in episode 1 was absolutely hilarious. Like, I had to pause the episode because I was on the floor laughing, and I thought maybe they were setting up some dark comedy aspect. But then in episode 3, they make death into this super serious thing with the emotional deaths of, I want to say, Silas and Ballantyne. That clearly the names are super memorable. But through the entire thing, I could only think about how casually they treated death in episode 1 compared to this, and it's like they tried to have their cake and eat it too. Also, not a single character that I actually cared about died, which I don't suppose really matters, but it does make the ending of the show way less impactful. Like, I was actually pretty impressed with it. I thought the show might have actually killed off Graylin, but nope, fake out death. Who doesn't love a fake out death? And then there was the actual plot itself, which was basically set up in a way that was, thing happens, Willow exposits a bunch of complete nonsense that the character pretends meant something, rinse, repeat. There were a couple different plot lines. Easily the one I was most invested in was the Mads Mardigan plot line, for what little time they spent on it. If you still cared about Eric by the time you saw him again in episode 7, props to you, because I hardly even remembered what he looked like. But the thing that bugged me most was how quickly the characters improved their skills in the story. Take Kit, for instance, because I think she's the biggest offender in this one. She starts off extremely arrogant and thinks that she's a super skilled sword fighter. Then Jade reveals that she'd been letting Kit win when they were sparring, and that Kit isn't anywhere near as good as she thinks she is, which is a good moment. They acknowledge their protagonist is flawed through her arrogance and challenge it by giving her a humbling moment. But other than a single line later on where Kit tells Jade, "Don't you dare hold back," this revelation pays off not at all. Kit is successful in almost every fight scene she's in, becoming this super fighter by the end of the show, and it's like, how? Why? When? We've hardly seen her training at all, and she was instantly at least on par or better than Jade. A similar thing happens with the magic when they make a big deal of how Elora has to practice and practice, but after she succeeds at growing that one plant early on, suddenly she can do everything. Even Graylin can do almost anything, even though he discovered his powers like the day before. But it is magic, so I am kind of willing to believe that there's a believe in yourself and you can do it aspect to it, but I don't believe that with Kit and the sword fighting, especially when you consider that Kit absolutely believed in herself to the point of big-headedness and couldn't do it, so I don't quite know how she improved her skill so quickly. And Kit being the chosen one at the end, the only one that Iron Man suit worked for, it really didn't hit the mark in the way that I think it should have, probably because it didn't feel like Kit herself did much to earn it. She went on the quest because the crone kidnapped her brother, and let's be honest, it was an excuse not to get married, and she's only the chosen one because of something her father did, as far as I could tell. It would have been way more impactful if the armor worked because of something Kit did off her own merit, rather than the fact that her dad was good, so she deserved it. Like, I spent half the show wondering why Kit was was our main character and not a Laura. Also, at some point they just seem to forget that Kit and Grey are betrothed. It could have been a real source of tension if they paid more focus onto what life will be like if and when they return. Would Saoirse still expect Kit to marry Grey and unite the kingdoms? Would their hardships make Kit more open or more closed off to a loveless marriage to unite the kingdoms? Would Saoirse let her marry Jade? Would she and Jade go and live with the Bone Reaver people in order to evade the social system? There are a lot of potential conversation and debates here, but once Jade and Kit get together, no one even seems to consider the fact that Kit is already engaged and supposed to marry Graylin. Like, they seem to show Kit starting to care for Graylin when he's possessed, and I really think that there needed to be a serious conversation where they had an honest heart-to-heart, confessed that they did care about each other, but what they had wasn't love, and that they couldn't devote their lives to each other, and maybe found some sort of compromise where they said that their hardships would mean that they would keep their kingdoms allied no matter what, or something. Oh, and the lesbian couple, I really don't have an issue with it, although I swear that Kit had more chemistry with Laura than Jade by the end of the show. Like, sometimes I just didn't really feel the chemistry between Jade and Kit, but I don't have a problem in the show the same way that a lot of people seem to over that. I think it was fine. It just, the way it was written did feel very like preteen, young adult sort of feel to it though. I mean, I would have been really invested in this plot line when I was 14. Which, if that was what the writers were going for, that's fine, but I honestly haven't got a clue what they were going for in terms of the age audience, so either congratulations or you screwed up. Also, for a show called Willow, Willow was the character I cared about the least, probably because it's really hard to care about a character when 90% of their lines are expositional, fantastical mumbo-jumbo that makes little to no sense to anyone who doesn't understand what he's on about. And I know that that was a lot of complaining, but honestly, to say that I got no enjoyment out of this show would be a complete lie. If you're looking for something just to stick on in the background while you're doing something else, this show is good for something like that. There's enough happening and enough flashing colours to keep you engaged if you're just passively watching, and the plot only seems really stupid if you actually start thinking about it. I think the problem is you can't get immersed in this show because of the music, because of the modern language. So if you're looking for a fantasy series to get really invested into, you're probably not going to enjoy Willow. But if you're looking for something a bit more casual to watch, something just to stick on, a bit of background noise, this show is enjoyable. I got enjoyment out of it as much as I moaned about it. So yeah, I think that there are definite upsides to the show, and I do like how the characters are explored. I think that some of the characters, especially in the second half of the show, do become a lot more memorable. But apart from that, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe if you did. It lets me know that this is something you want to see more of. What did you think of Willow? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you next week with another video. Bye!